When rancher Ezra Wallace saw the silver locket gleaming against the stranger's throat, his world tilted sideways, because he'd buried an identical one with his daughter's empty coffin 3 winters ago. The dust devil swept across the Colorado plains like a ghost seeking redemption, and Ezra Wallace squinted through the haze at the approaching rider. His weathered hands tightened on the fence post he'd been mending, splinters biting into calloused palms. Out here, 20 miles from the nearest town, visitors meant trouble more often than not. The rider was small, slight, a woman, he realized. As she drew closer, her chestnut mare picked its way carefully through the scattered rocks, and something about the way she sat the saddle spoke of Eastern breeding. City folk, most likely lost. "Afternoon, ma'am." Ezra touched the brim of his hat as she reined in beside his property line. "You seem to be a fair piece from anywhere." She pushed back her hood, revealing auburn hair that caught the late sun like burnished copper. Pretty enough, with green eyes that held secrets. But it was the necklace that made his breath catch. A delicate silver chain holding a heart-shaped locket, its surface etched with tiny roses, just like Sienna's. "I'm looking for the Wallace Ranch," she said, her voice carrying the refined cadence of Boston or Philadelphia. "I was told it was along this road." "You found it." His voice came out rougher than intended. "I'm Ezra Wallace. What's your business?" "Here." She dismounted with practiced grace, though he noticed her hands trembling slightly as she smoothed her riding skirt. "My name is Brooklyn Spencer. I'm looking for information about a little girl who might have lived here. Her name was Sienna." The hammer slipped from Ezra's grasp, clattering against the fence post. 3 years. 3 years since the fever took his daughter, since he'd laid her small body in the ground beside her mother's grave, since he'd placed her precious locket in the coffin because he couldn't bear to look at it anymore. "Sienna Wallace was my daughter," he said quietly. "She died when she was 7. Brooklyn's face went pale as winter snow. Her hand flew to her throat, fingers closing around the locket. "Oh God, I was afraid of this. Where did you get that necklace?" She took a step back, suddenly wary. It was given to me by someone who said it belonged to a little girl named Sienna Wallace." "That's impossible." Ezra's voice turned hard as granite. "I buried that locket with my daughter." "So either you're lying, or you've been talking to grave robbers." "No, you don't understand. I understand plenty." He moved closer, his shadow falling across her face. "My daughter had one just like it. Identical. I had it made special for her 5th birthday by a silversmith in Denver. There was only one." Brooklyn's green eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Wallace, please. I didn't come here to hurt you. I came because I hoped." She swallowed hard. "I thought Sienna might still be alive." The words hit him like a physical blow. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt, and he had to grip the fence post to steady himself. "She's dead. I held her in my arms when she drew her last breath." "But what if she didn't die? What if someone wanted you to think she did?" "That's enough." His voice cracked like a whip. "You're either touched in the head or you're some kind of confidence woman. Either way, you need to get off my land." Brooklyn reached into her saddlebag and pulled out a small, leather-bound journal. "Before you send me away, please, just look at this." Against his better judgment, Ezra took the journal. The leather was soft with age, and when he opened it, he found pages covered in a child's careful handwriting. His heart nearly stopped when he saw the name scrawled on the first page. Sienna Wallace, age 7. "Where did you get this?" "From a woman named Ivy Chandler. She runs a boarding house in Kansas City. She's been caring for a little girl she calls Addison Green, but the child remembers her real name." "She remembers you." Ezra's hands shook as he turned the pages. Childish drawings of horses and flowers filled the margins. Stories about a ranch and a papa who taught her to ride. Details only his daughter would know. "She writes about you every day," Brooklyn continued softly. "About how she misses you and wants to come home. Mrs. Chandler hired me to find you because—" She paused, her voice catching. "Because Sienna, Addison, she's dying." The journal fell from his nerveless fingers. "What?" "The same fever that supposedly killed her 3 years ago. It's come back. Mrs. Chandler says she has maybe a month, perhaps less. She's been asking for her papa." Ezra stared at this woman, who claimed to bring news from the dead. Part of him wanted to believe, wanted to hope. But the other part, the part that had grieved and buried his child, recoiled from the cruelty of false hope. You're lying, he whispered. I'm not. Brooklyn knelt and picked up the journal, pressing it back into his hands. I know how impossible this must sound, but look at this necklace. Really look at it. She unclasped the chain and held it out to him. In the fading light, he could see the tiny inscription on the back of the locket. To my little Rose, Papa, the same words he'd had, engraved on Sienna's locket. How? The word came out as barely a breath. I don't know, but I intend to find out. The question is, Mr. Wallace, are you brave enough to hope that your daughter might still be alive? The silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Ezra's throat worked, swallowing words that threatened to spill out like water from a cracked dam. 3 years of grief, 3 years of guilt, 3 years of wondering if he could have done something different. If he'd been a better father, a better man. Tell me about her, he said finally. This girl you claim is my daughter. Brooklyn's face softened, and for the first time since she'd arrived, she seemed to relax. She's small for her age, but fierce. Mrs. Chandler says she refuses to wear dresses, insists on trousers like the boys. She can ride bareback better than most grown men. Despite himself, Ezra's mouth quirked upward. Sienna never could abide skirts. Said they were fool things that kept a person from doing what needed doing. She has a scar on her left palm, shaped like a crescent moon. His breath caught. From when she tried to help me shoe the bay gelding. She was 5, stubborn as a mule. The horse shifted, and she grabbed the hot iron. She still wears her hair in 2 braids, even though Mrs. Chandler tries to convince her. That young lady should wear it up. Her mother's hair, Ezra whispered. Catherine always braided it just so. He ran a trembling hand through his own dark locks. You describe her perfectly, but that doesn't prove anything. Could be you heard these details from someone else. She talks in her sleep, Brooklyn said quietly. Calls for someone named Cooper. Says he's her best friend, and she misses him terribly. The words hit him like a physical blow. Cooper had been Sienna's pony, a stubborn little paint horse she'd raised from a foal. The animal had grieved so deeply after her death that Ezra had been forced to sell him to a family in Denver, unable to bear the constant reminder of his loss. How long has she been sick, he asked. 2 weeks, maybe 3. It started as a cough. But now, Brooklyn's voice trailed off. Mrs. Chandler says it's the same fever that nearly killed her before. Her body remembers the fight, but it's weaker now. Ezra closed his eyes, remembering those terrible days when Sienna had burned with fever, when he'd held her small body and felt the life ebbing from her like water from a broken vessel. The doctor had said it was a miracle she'd survived as long as she had. If she's really alive, he said slowly, then who did I bury? I don't know, but I think someone wanted you to believe she was dead. Someone who had reason to take her away from you. That's impossible. Everyone loved Sienna. She was just a child. Brooklyn's green eyes hardened. Children get taken for lots of reasons, Mr. Wallace. Sometimes it's about money. Sometimes it's about revenge. Sometimes it's about love so twisted it becomes something else entirely. A chill ran down Ezra's spine that had nothing to do with the evening air. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that someone staged your daughter's death and took her away. Someone who knew enough about your family to make it convincing. Someone who had access to your home, your life. But the fever could have been induced. Certain plants, certain poisons, can mimic the symptoms of mountain fever. Make a person appear dead when they're merely unconscious. Ezra stared at her in horror. You're talking about murder. About someone deliberately. I'm talking about kidnapping. And I think whoever did it is still out there, still watching, still waiting. As if summoned by her words, a glint of metal caught the dying sunlight from the ridge above. Ezra's hand moved instinctively to his hip, where his Colt .45 rested in its worn leather holster. We're being watched, he said quietly. Brooklyn tensed, her hand moving to her own weapon, a small derringer hidden in the folds of her skirt. I know. I've felt eyes on me since I left Kansas City. Someone's been following me. Why didn't you say something? Because I wasn't sure if they were following me or waiting for me to lead them to you. She met his gaze steadily. I think whoever took Sienna knows I'm here, knows I found you. The implications crashed over him like a wave. If Brooklyn was right, if someone had taken his daughter and faked her death, then that same someone might be willing to kill to keep their secret safe. You need to leave, he said roughly. Get back on that horse and ride away. If you're right about any of this, then you're in danger just being here. I'm not leaving without you. I never said I was coming with you. Then you're a fool. Her voice cracked like a whip. That little girl is dying, Mr. Wallace. Dying and calling for her papa. If you're too much of a coward to face the possibility that you buried the wrong child, then you're not the man she remembers. Her words stung, but they also lit a fire in his chest. Don't you dare question my love for my daughter. Then prove it. Come with me to Kansas City. See for yourself. And if it's not her, if this is some elaborate scheme too, then you'll know for certain that she's gone, and you can finally let her rest in peace. But if it is her, Brooklyn's voice softened. If it is her, then she needs you now more than she ever has. The wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of sage and distant rain. Ezra looked toward the ridge where he'd seen the glint of metal, but whoever had been watching was gone now. The silence felt ominous, heavy with unspoken threats. There's something else, Brooklyn said quietly. Something I didn't tell you. What? The day before I left Kansas City, someone broke into Mrs. Chandler's boarding house. They didn't take anything, but they searched Sienna's room thoroughly. They were looking for something. What kind of something? I don't know, but I think they found it, because that's when the fever came back. That's when she started getting sicker. But even as hope flickered in his chest like a candle in a storm, Ezra couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been watching them from the ridge above, and that Brooklyn Spencer carried more secrets than just a little girl's necklace. The decision came to Ezra like lightning splitting oak, sudden, violent, and irreversible. He strode toward the house, his boots striking the porch boards with the rhythm of a man who'd found his purpose. Where are you going? Brooklyn called after him. To pack. He paused at the door, his hand on the weathered handle. If there's even a chance my daughter is alive, I'm not leaving her to die among strangers. Brooklyn's relief was palpable as she followed him into the modest ranch house. The interior spoke of a man living with ghosts, dust sheets over furniture, a cold hearth, and photographs turned face down on the mantel. But it was the small bedroom at the end of the hall that made her breath catch. Sienna's room remained exactly as she'd left it 3 years ago. A patchwork quilt lay folded at the foot of a narrow bed, and wooden horses lined the windowsill like sentries. Children's books stacked beside a rocking chair, their pages yellowed with age. I couldn't bear to change anything, Ezra said quietly, watching Brooklyn examine the room. Kept thinking she might come back and wonder where her things had gone. Brooklyn picked up a small wooden horse, its paint worn smooth by tiny hands. She carved this herself, didn't she? How did you? She has 6 more just like it in Kansas City. Mrs. Chandler says she whittles them from memory, trying to recreate the one she lost. Brooklyn set the horse down gently. She remembers everything about this place, Mr. Wallace. Every horse, every corner, every story you told her. Ezra turned away before she could see the tears threatening to spill. 3 years of believing his daughter was dead. 3 years of carrying guilt like a stone in his chest. The possibility that she'd been alive all this time, suffering, calling for him. It was almost too much to bear. Tell me about this Ivy Chandler, he said, pulling a worn saddlebag from the closet. How do you know her? She's my aunt. My mother's sister. Brooklyn's voice carried an odd note, something between affection and wariness. She took me in when I was 15, after my parents died. Taught me to be independent, to take care of myself. And she sent you to find me. She's tried everything else. Doctors, medicines, prayers. Nothing works. Sienna. Addison, she just keeps getting weaker. 2 nights ago, she grabbed my hand and begged me to find her papa. Said she couldn't die without seeing him again. Ezra's hands stilled on the clothes he was packing. She said that, word for word. She made me promise. Brooklyn moved to the window, her fingers tracing the glass. There's something else, though? Something I haven't told you. Seems to be a lot of that going around. She turned to face him, and in the lamplight, he could see the worry lines etched around her eyes. My aunt isn't just a boarding house keeper, Mr. Wallace. She helps people. People who need to disappear. What kind of people? Women running from violent husbands. Children escaping abuse. Sometimes folks who've witnessed things they shouldn't have. Brooklyn's voice dropped to a whisper. The kind of people who need new names, new lives. Understanding dawned on Ezra like a cold sunrise. You're saying someone brought Sienna to her. Someone who wanted her hidden. I'm saying Ivy Chandler doesn't ask questions about the children who show up at her door. She just takes them in and keeps them safe. Brooklyn met his gaze steadily. But she's been wondering about Addison from the beginning. A 7-year-old who speaks like she's been educated, who knows things about ranching that city children shouldn't know. And you think whoever brought her there, I think they're the same person who's been watching us. The same person who broke into the boarding house. Brooklyn's hand moved to her hip, where her derringer waited. I think they know we're getting close to the truth. A floorboard creaked somewhere in the house, and both of them froze. Ezra's hand moved to his gun, his eyes scanning the doorway. The sound came again, deliberate, careful, the footstep of someone trying not to be heard. Stay here, he whispered, moving toward the door. Like hell. Brooklyn drew her derringer, the small weapon looking almost delicate in her hands. I've been running from shadows for 3 days. I'm tired of being afraid. They moved through the house like dancers, each step coordinated, each breath controlled. The kitchen was empty, but the back door stood slightly ajar, a door Ezra was certain he'd locked before going out to mend fences. Someone's been inside, he said grimly. Looking for what? Same thing they were looking for in Kansas City, I'd wager. He checked the door frame, looking for signs of forced entry. Question is, did they find it? A horse whinnied from the barn, high and nervous. Ezra's blood ran cold. He'd turned the animals out to pasture hours ago. There shouldn't be anything in the barn except hay and memories. The barn, Brooklyn breathed. They crept across the yard, keeping to the shadows. The barn door hung open, and from within came the sound of someone moving around, searching through the stalls. Ezra pressed himself against the wall beside the door, motioning for Brooklyn to take the other side. I know you're out there, Wallace. The voice that drifted from the barn was cultured, educated, and familiar. No point in hiding. We need to talk. Ezra's jaw clenched. He knew that voice, though he hadn't heard it in 3 years. Nolan Sullivan. Should have known you'd turn up like a bad penny. Come inside, old friend, and bring the lovely Miss Spencer with you. I believe she has something that belongs to me. Brooklyn looked confused, but Ezra's face had gone hard as granite. Nolan Sullivan, the town's former doctor, the man who'd pronounced Sienna dead, the man who'd insisted on handling all the burial arrangements, the man who'd disappeared from town the day after the funeral. You son of a bitch, Ezra growled, stepping into the barn with his gun drawn. Sullivan stood in the center of the barn, immaculate in his city clothes despite the dust and hay. He was older than Ezra remembered, his hair gone silver at the temples. But his eyes held the same cold intelligence that had always made Ezra uneasy. Now, no need for harsh words. Sullivan's smile was razor thin. I'm here to make you an offer. The only thing I want from you is the truth about what happened to my daughter. Ah, yes, little Sienna. Such a spirited child. It would have been a shame to let her die of that fever, don't you think? The admission hit Ezra like a physical blow. You bastard. You took her. I saved her. From you. From this godforsaken place. From a life of poverty and ignorance. Sullivan's voice held no trace of remorse. I gave her education, culture, refinement. Everything you never could. You let me believe she was dead. A necessary fiction. You would never have let her go willingly, and she needed to be somewhere safe while she recovered from the fever. My sister's boarding house in Kansas City seemed perfect. Brooklyn's gasp echoed through the barn. Ivy Chandler is your sister? Sullivan's smile widened. Didn't she tell you? How unfortunate. I suppose she thought you'd be more motivated if you believed you were acting out of pure altruism. You're lying, Brooklyn said, but her voice shook. Am I? Ask yourself, my dear. How did you know exactly where to find Mr. Wallace? How did you know which roads to take, which towns to ask in? Did you really think a 7-year-old child could provide such detailed directions? The pieces clicked into place like bullets sliding into a chamber. Brooklyn's perfect knowledge of the route, her ease in finding the ranch, the way she'd known exactly what to say to convince him to come with her. You've been playing us both, Ezra said, his gun trained on Sullivan's chest. I've been protecting my investment. Sienna is a remarkable child, Mr. Wallace. Intelligent, resilient, adaptable. With proper guidance, she could become something extraordinary. She's not your property, isn't she? I saved her life. I've provided for her, educated her, given her opportunities you never could. In every way that matters, she's more my daughter than yours. The words hit their mark, and Sullivan saw it. His smile turned predatory. but I'm not unreasonable. I'm prepared to make a deal. What kind of deal? Your ranch. Sign it over to me, and I'll tell you where to find Sienna. I'll even let you say goodbye before she dies." But as Ezra stared into the cold eyes of the man who'd stolen his daughter, he realized that some deals were made with the devil himself, and that Brooklyn Spencer might not be the ally she'd claimed to be. The silence in the barn stretched taut. As a hangman's rope, Ezra's finger hovered over the trigger of his Colt, while Brooklyn stood frozen between two men who'd turned her world upside down in a matter of minutes. "You're insane if you think I'll give you my ranch," Ezra said, his voice deadly quiet. "Are you?" Sullivan pulled out a pocket watch, checking the time with theatrical precision. "It's nearly 7 o'clock, Mr. Wallace. By my calculations, you have perhaps 18 hours before your daughter draws her last breath. The fever is aggressive this time." "This time?" Brooklyn's voice cracked like a whip. "What do you mean, this time?" Sullivan's smile was cold as winter starlight. "Did you really think the fever just returned by coincidence, my dear? I've been controlling Sienna's condition for 3 years. A little foxglove to slow the heart, some belladonna to bring on the sweats. Just enough to keep her weak, manageable. You've been poisoning her." The words came out of Ezra like a growl. "I've been maintaining her in a state of dependence. Children are so much easier to control when they're not at full strength." Sullivan's voice held no trace of remorse. "But I stopped the treatments 2 weeks ago. Thought it was time to let nature take its course." Brooklyn's derringer swung towards Sullivan, her hand trembling with rage. "You monster! She's just a child. She's a tool, Miss Spencer. A very effective one, as you've proven." Sullivan's eyes glittered with malice. "Did you really think your aunt sent you on this mission out of the goodness of her heart? You've been dancing to my tune from the very beginning." "That's not true." But even as she said it, Brooklyn's voice wavered. Too many coincidences, too many perfectly timed revelations. The way Aunt Ivy had insisted she was the only one who could make this journey, the way she'd known exactly where to find information about Ezra Wallace. "Isn't it? Think, my dear. How did your aunt know Sienna's real name? How did she know where to find her father? I've been feeding her information for months, preparing for this moment." Ezra watched Brooklyn's face crumble as the truth sank in. Whatever her faults, whatever her secrets, she genuinely cared about the child. He could see it in the way her shoulders shook, in the tears that threatened to spill from her green eyes. "Why?" Brooklyn whispered. "Why use me?" "Because you're convincing, passionate, the kind of woman who could make a grieving father believe in miracles." Sullivan's laugh was like glass breaking. "And because you have something I need. I don't have anything of yours." "Oh, but you do. The locket, Miss Spencer. The one you've been wearing so prominently. It's not just a piece of jewelry, it's a key." Brooklyn's hand flew to her throat, fingers closing protectively around the silver chain. "A key to what?" "To a safety deposit box in Denver. Your dying girl was quite clever for a 7-year-old. She hid something before I could find it, something that could ruin me entirely." Sullivan's voice turned dangerous. "And she encoded the location in that pretty little trinket around your neck." Ezra's mind raced. "What kind of something?" "Letters. Documents. Evidence of certain irregularities in my medical practice. It seems our little Sienna was quite the observer. She saw things, heard things, remembered things that could send me to prison. Or the gallows," Ezra said grimly. "Precisely. Which is why I need that locket, and why I need both of you to disappear permanently once I have it." The barn door creaked, and a new voice cut through the tension like a blade. "I'm afraid that's not going to happen, brother." Everyone turned to see a woman silhouetted in the doorway. She was perhaps 50, with steel-gray hair and eyes that held the hardness of someone who'd seen too much of the world's cruelty. But it was the rifle in her hands that commanded attention. "Ivy," Sullivan breathed. "What are you doing here?" "Cleaning up your mess." Again, Ivy Chandler stepped into the barn, her rifle trained on her brother. "Though I have to say, Nolan, this is the worst one yet." Brooklyn stared at the woman who'd raised her. "And Ivy, I don't understand. I know, sweetheart, and I'm sorry for the deception. But your uncle's right about one thing. That child is dying, and she needs her father. Then why all the games?" Ezra demanded. "Why not just tell me the truth from the beginning?" "Because the truth is complicated, Mr. Wallace. And because I needed to be sure you were the kind of man worth saving a child for." Ivy's gaze never left her brother. I've been watching you for 3 years, making sure you were grieving properly, making sure you hadn't forgotten your daughter. You've been watching me. Someone had to. Nolan may have taken your child, but he's not the only one with sins to answer for. Ivy's voice turned hard. You want to know the real truth, Mr. Wallace? Your daughter didn't just witness my brother's crimes. She witnessed yours. The words hit Ezra like a physical blow. What are you talking about? The night before she got sick, you were in the barn with a man named Tate Emerson, a man who'd been asking questions about some missing cattle, questions that made you nervous. Ezra's blood ran cold. He remembered that night, remembered the confrontation with Emerson, remembered the way it had ended. But Sienna had been asleep in the house. She couldn't have seen anything. She followed you out there. Ivy continued relentlessly. Hid in the loft. Watched you and Emerson fight. Watched you hit him with that shovel. Watched him fall. It was self-defense, Ezra said, but his voice lacked conviction. Was it? Or were you just protecting your little rustling operation? The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Brooklyn stared at Ezra, seeing him with new eyes. The respected rancher, the grieving father, was it all a lie? You don't understand, Ezra said desperately. After Catherine died, I was desperate. The ranch was failing. I had debts. So you started stealing cattle and selling them in Denver. Ivy finished. And when Tate Emerson got too close to the truth, you killed him. I didn't mean to. He pulled a gun. I defended myself. And your 7-year-old daughter saw it all. Saw her beloved papa kill a man and bury him in the back pasture. Ivy's voice held no mercy. Is it any wonder she got sick? Is it any wonder she nearly died from the shock? Sullivan laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Oh, this is Rich. The grieving father, the righteous rancher. Nothing but a common murderer and cattle thief. Shut up, Nolan. Ivy's rifle swung toward her brother. You're no better. At least. Ezra's crimes were born of desperation. Yours come from pure greed. I saved that child's life. You kidnapped her. You let her father believe she was dead for 3 years. Ivy's composure cracked, showing the fury beneath. You poisoned her, controlled her, used her as a pawn in your sick games. She was better off with me than with him, Sullivan snarled, pointing at Ezra. At least I never killed anyone in front of her. No, you just slowly murdered her spirit instead. Ivy's voice broke. Do you have any idea what it's been like, watching that child waste away? Listening to her cry for a father who thought she was dead? Brooklyn found her voice at last. Where is she? Where is Sienna? In Kansas City, but not at the boarding house. Ivy's eyes never left her brother. I moved her 2 days ago when I realized what Nolan was planning. She's safe, but she's dying, and she needs her father. Then let's go, Ezra said, stepping forward. Not so fast. Sullivan's hand moved to his coat, and suddenly there was a derringer in his palm. Nobody's going anywhere until I get what I came for. The barn erupted in chaos. Sullivan fired at Ivy, who dove behind a stall. Brooklyn screamed and dropped to the ground. Ezra lunged for Sullivan, his larger frame overwhelming the smaller man. They crashed into the hay bales, rolling and fighting. Sullivan's gun went flying, landing somewhere in the scattered straw. Ezra's hands found Sullivan's throat, squeezing with 3 years of rage and grief. Where is she? He growled. Where's my daughter? Go. To hell. Sullivan gasped out. A gunshot split the air, and Sullivan went limp. Ezra looked up to see Brooklyn standing over them, her derringer smoking in her hand. He would have killed you, she said simply. Ivy emerged from behind the stall, her rifle still ready. Good shot, sweetheart. Though I was hoping to get some answers out of him first. We have what we need, Brooklyn said, her hand moving to the locket at her throat. This key he mentioned. If Sienna really did hide evidence, then maybe we can find it. First things first, Ezra said, standing slowly. We need to get to Kansas City. If my daughter is dying. She's not in Kansas City, Ivy said quietly. I lied about that too. But as the three of them stood in the blood-soaked barn, surrounded by the wreckage of their deceptions, none of them noticed the figure watching from the shadows, or the fact that Nolan Sullivan's chest was still rising and falling with shallow, determined breaths. The oil lamp exploded against the barn wall like a dying star, sending flames racing up the dry timber with hungry tongues. In the chaos of fire and smoke, Nolan Sullivan rolled away from Ezra's grasp, his hand pressed against the blood seeping through his vest. You should have aimed for the heart, my dear, he gasped to Brooklyn, producing a second derringer from his boot. Now everyone burns. Ivy's rifle cracked, splintering the wood beside Sullivan's head as he dove behind a stack of hay bales. The flames climbed higher, casting dancing shadows that turned the barn into a vision of hell itself. The whole place is going up, Brooklyn shouted over the roar of fire. We have to get out. But Sullivan's laughter echoed through the smoke. Not without my insurance policy. Tell me where the child is hidden, sister dear, or we all burn together. Ezra grabbed a horse blanket, beating at the flames spreading along the wall. The heat pressed against his face like the breath of a furnace, and he could feel his lungs burning with each breath. Ivy, where is Sienna? The old mine shaft, Ivy called. Back, her rifle trained on the hay bales where Sullivan had taken cover. 15 miles north of here, past Devil's Canyon. There's a cabin hidden in the rocks where the creek bends. A shot rang out from behind the hay, and Ivy cried out as the bullet grazed her shoulder. She stumbled backward, her rifle clattering to the ground. And Ivy, Brooklyn lunged forward, but Sullivan emerged from his hiding place, his derringer aimed at her heart. The locket, Miss Spencer. Now, the barn groaned overhead as flames ate through the support beams. Burning hay rained down like hellish snow, and the air grew thick with smoke that seared their throats with every breath that Brooklyn's fingers fumbled with the clasp of the necklace. If I give this to you, will you let us go? Of course, Sullivan lied smoothly. I'm a man of my word. Like hell you are. Ezra stepped forward, his hands empty, but his eyes burning with something fiercer than the flames around them. You've lied about everything else. Why should we trust you now? Because, Mr. Wallace, I'm the only one who knows the antidote to the poison I've been feeding your daughter. Kill me, and she dies anyway. The words hit Ezra like a physical blow. Even if they reached Sienna, even if she was still alive, Sullivan held her life in his hands like a puppet master controlling the strings. What antidote? Brooklyn demanded. A simple herbal mixture. Digitalis to stabilize the heart, activated. Charcoal to absorb the toxins. Without it, the foxglove and belladonna will kill her within hours. Sullivan's smile was triumphant even as blood soaked through his shirt. So you see, you need me alive. A burning beam crashed down between them, sending sparks flying like angry wasps. The heat was becoming unbearable, and the smoke made it hard to see more than a few feet in any direction. Tell us the recipe, Ivy said, pressing a hand to her wounded shoulder. Tell us, and we'll get you out of here. The locket first. Brooklyn looked at Ezra, saw the agony in his eyes, the impossible choice he faced. Save his daughter's life by trusting the man who'd stolen it, or watch her die to preserve his principles. Do it, he said quietly. To Brooklyn's hands shook as she unclasped the necklace. But instead of handing it to Sullivan, she hurled it across the burning barn, where it disappeared into the flames and smoke. No, Sullivan screamed, lunging after it. The recipe, Brooklyn shouted. Give us the recipe, or we all burn. Sullivan turned back to them, his face twisted with rage and desperation. You stupid girl. That locket was the only. Ezra tackled him, driving them both to the ground as another beam crashed down. They rolled through the burning hay, Sullivan clawing at Ezra's eyes while Ezra's hands found the doctor's throat. The antidote, Ezra growled. Tell me now. Never, Sullivan gasped. If I can't have what I want, then neither can you. The barn was becoming an inferno. The walls groaned and buckled as the fire consumed everything in its path. Brooklyn grabbed Ivy's arm, helping the older woman toward the door. Ezra, we have to go. But Ezra wasn't listening. 3 years of grief, 3 years of guilt, 3 years of believing his daughter was dead. It all focused into a single point of white-hot rage. His hands tightened around Sullivan's throat. She's dying because of you, he whispered. My little girl is dying, and you're the only one who can save her. Sullivan's eyes bulged, his face turning purple. But just as consciousness began to fade, he managed to gasp out a few words. Digitalis. 3 drops. Morning glory seeds. Ground fine. Ezra loosened his grip. What else? Charcoal. Activated. 2 spoonfuls. Sullivan's voice was barely a whisper. Mixed in water. Every 4 hours. Is that all? Sullivan nodded weakly. Then his hand moved with surprising speed, pulling a knife from his belt and driving it toward Ezra's ribs. Ezra twisted away, but the blade caught him across the forearm, opening a deep gash that immediately began to bleed. He rolled backward, away from Sullivan, as the doctor struggled to his feet. "You'll never make it in time," Sullivan snarled, blood running from his mouth. 15 miles through Devil's Canyon at night? She'll be dead before you get there." "Maybe," Ezra said, standing slowly. "But at least I'll die trying to save her instead of living with the knowledge that I let her down again." The roof began to collapse, sending a shower of sparks and burning timber crashing to the ground. Sullivan screamed as flames engulfed the hay bales around him, his clothes catching fire like kindling. Ezra turned away, refusing to watch. Even after everything, he couldn't stomach the sight of a man burning alive. Brooklyn grabbed his uninjured arm. "We have to go now." They stumbled out of the barn just as the roof caved in completely. The night air felt cool against their smoke-blackened faces, but there was no time to savor it. Somewhere in the darkness, Sienna was dying, and they had precious little time to reach her. "The horses," Ivy said, her voice weak from blood loss. "In the corral behind the house." Ezra looked at her shoulder, saw the dark stain spreading across her shirt. "You're hurt bad. You can't make that ride." "I'll have to. That child needs all the help she can get." Ivy's jaw set with determination. "Besides, I know where the cabin is. You'll never find it without me." "The antidote, do you know how to make it?" "I know enough. Digitalis is foxglove, same plant he's been poisoning her with. Morning glory seeds can be found along any roadside. Charcoal we can make from the fire if we have to." Brooklyn tore strips from her skirt, binding Ivy's wound as best she could. "What about supplies? Food, water, medical equipment?" "There's a cache at the cabin. I've been preparing for this day for months." Ivy winced as Brooklyn tightened the bandage. "The question is whether we can get there before the poison kills her." Ezra looked back at the burning barn, at the inferno that had consumed the lies and deceptions of the past 3 years. Sullivan was dead, but his final curse might still claim Sienna's life. "Then we ride hard and pray harder," he said grimly. They moved toward the corral with desperate urgency. 3 horses stood waiting, their eyes rolling white with fear at the smell of smoke and fire. But as Ezra approached his favorite mare, a swift bay named Lightning, a sound made him freeze, hoofbeats, coming fast from the direction of town. "Company," Brooklyn said. Her hand moving to her reloaded Derringer .6 riders emerged from the darkness, their faces hard and purposeful. The man in the lead wore a sheriff's badge that caught the firelight like a malevolent star. "Ezra Wallace," the sheriff called out. "You're under arrest for the murder of Tate Emerson." But as the flames behind them painted the night sky crimson, and the sound of approaching riders filled the air, Ezra realized that saving his daughter would require him to become the outlaw he'd never wanted to be, and that the woman beside him might be the only person willing to ride into hell with him. Sheriff Coleman's voice cut through the night like a judge's gavel. "Step away from the horses, Wallace. You've got nowhere to run." Ezra's hand hovered over his gun, calculating odds that seemed impossible. 6 lawmen against 3 wounded people, with his daughter dying somewhere in the wilderness beyond. But then Brooklyn stepped forward, her chin raised with the defiance of a woman who'd found her courage in fire and blood. "Sheriff Coleman," she called out, her voice carrying the authority of someone born to command. "I'm Brooklyn Spencer of the Boston Spencers. Perhaps you've heard of my family's influence in territorial politics?" The sheriff's confident expression flickered. Everyone in Colorado knew the Spencer name. Railroad money, mining interests, the kind of political connections that could make or break a lawman's career. "Miss Spencer," he said carefully, "I wasn't aware you were involved in this situation. Mr. Wallace is under my family's protection. Any charges against him will be handled through proper legal channels in Denver, not by some frontier lynch mob." Brooklyn's voice could have cut glass. "I trust you understand the implications of proceeding without proper jurisdiction." It was a bluff, but it worked. Coleman's men shifted uncertainly in their saddles, suddenly unsure of their authority. In the moment of hesitation, Ezra made his choice. "Ride," he shouted, vaulting onto Lightning's back. The corral exploded into chaos. Horses reared and scattered as Brooklyn and Ivy mounted their own steeds. Gunshots cracked through the night. Air, But the lawmen were too surprised to aim true. They thundered out of the yard and into the darkness, leaving shouting voices and pursuing hoofbeats behind them. The cool night air whipped against their faces as they rode hard toward Devil's Canyon, where secrets waited in the shadow of ancient stone. "They'll follow us," Brooklyn called over the drumming of hooves. "Let them," Ezra replied grimly. "Nothing on earth is going to stop me from reaching my daughter." The trail to Devil's Canyon was treacherous even in daylight. Narrow paths that wound between towering rock formations, loose shale that could send a horse tumbling into the abyss below. But they rode with the desperation of people who had everything to lose and nothing left to fear. Ivy's face was pale with blood loss, but her voice remained steady as she guided them through the maze of stone. "Left at the lightning-split pine," she called, then down into the creek bed. The sound of water grew louder as they descended, and soon they were riding through a narrow canyon where the walls rose like cathedral spires on either side. Moonlight filtered down through the gap above, painting everything in shades of silver and shadow. "There," Ivy whispered, pointing to a cluster of rocks ahead. "The cabin's hidden behind those boulders." They dismounted and led their horses through a gap barely wide enough for a man. Beyond lay a small clearing where a rough-hewn cabin nestled against the canyon wall, its windows glowing with the warm light of oil lamps. A woman emerged from the doorway, elderly, gray-haired, with the gentle bearing of someone who'd spent her life caring for others. But it was the small figure beside her that made Ezra's heart stop. Sienna. She was thinner than he remembered, her face pale and drawn with illness. But her dark eyes, Catherine's eyes, still held the spark of spirit that had defined her from birth. When she saw him, those eyes widened with disbelief and desperate hope. "Papa." The word came out as barely a whisper. Ezra dropped to his knees as she stumbled toward him on unsteady legs. When he caught her in his arms, she felt fragile as a bird, all hollow bones and fevered skin. But she was alive. Alive. "I knew you'd come," she whispered against his chest. "I knew you wouldn't forget me." "Never," he choked out. "Never in 1,000 years." But even as he held her, he could feel the heat radiating from her small body, could hear the wheeze in her breathing that spoke of lungs filling with fluid. Time was running out. "The antidote," Brooklyn said urgently to the woman from the cabin. "Do you have the ingredients?" "Some of them. Martha's my name. I've been caring for the child." The woman's voice was thick with mountain accent, but clear with purpose. "Got digitalis growing wild behind the cabin. Charcoal from the cook stove. But morning glory seeds. I saw some along the creek bed," Ivy said, swaying on her feet. "About a quarter-mile back." "I'll get them," Brooklyn said, already turning toward her horse. "I'll come with you," Ezra said, but Sienna's small hand gripped his shirt with surprising strength. "Don't leave me again, Papa. Please." The words cut through him like a blade. He looked into his daughter's fever-bright eyes and saw 3 years of abandonment, 3 years of wondering why her father had let her go. "I won't leave you," he promised. "Not ever again." Brooklyn touched his shoulder gently. "I'll be back before you know it. Take care of her." She disappeared into the night, leaving Ezra alone with the daughter he'd thought was dead. Martha busied herself preparing what ingredients they had, while Ivy slumped against the cabin wall, her strength finally failing. "I'm sorry, Papa," Sienna whispered. "I saw you in the barn that night. With that man. I was scared." Ezra's throat tightened. "You don't have anything to be sorry for, little Rose. I'm the one who's sorry. I failed you." "No," she said firmly, her voice carrying an echo of the woman she might have grown up to be. "You protected me. Dr. Sullivan said you were bad, but I knew better. You're my papa." The sound of hoofbeats echoed from the canyon mouth. Too many horses, coming too fast. The sheriff had found them. "They're here," Martha said grimly. Ezra looked down at his daughter, at the trust shining in her eyes despite everything she'd endured. He could run again, take her deeper into the wilderness. But she was too sick for another hard ride, and he was tired of running from the truth. "Let them come," he said quietly. Sheriff Coleman appeared at the gap in the rocks, his gun drawn but his face uncertain. Behind him came his deputies, their weapons ready but their expressions confused by the domestic scene before them. A sick child, an injured woman, a father holding his daughter. "Ezra Wallace," Coleman said slowly. "You're under arrest." "I know." Ezra stood slowly, his hands visible and empty. But my daughter's dying. Let me save her first. Coleman looked at Sienna, saw the fever in her cheeks, the way she struggled for each breath. Something in his face softened. Perhaps he had children of his own. What do you need? Before Ezra could answer, Brooklyn burst through the gap in the rocks, her hands full of purple morning glory pots. I got them, she called, then stopped short at the sight of the lawmen. It's all right, Ezra said. They're going to help. Working together, they prepared the antidote according to Sullivan's dying words. 3 drops of digitalis extract, morning glory seeds ground to powder, activated charcoal mixed with clean water. It looked like nothing special, muddy water. In a tin cup, but it represented hope. Sienna drank it without complaint, trusting her father completely. Then came the waiting, the long hours of the night when they could only watch and pray as dawn broke over the canyon walls, painting the rocks in shades of gold and rose. Sienna's fever finally broke. Her breathing eased, and color returned to her pale cheeks. Papa, she said, her voice stronger than it had been in days. I'm here, little Rose. Can we go home now? I want to see Cooper. Ezra smiled through his tears. Cooper's been waiting. For you. We all have. Sheriff Coleman cleared his throat. Mr. Wallace, you're still under arrest. But, given the circumstances, I think we can work something out. Maybe something involving restitution rather than prison time. Brooklyn stepped forward, her hand finding Ezra's. The Spencer family has considerable influence with the territorial governor. I'm sure we can arrange something appropriate. As they prepared to leave the canyon, Ivy pulled Ezra aside. I have something for you, she said, pressing a small object into his hand. That it was the locket, somehow retrieved from the burning barn, its silver surface blackened but intact. For Sienna, Ivy said. Every little girl needs something to remember her mama by. Ezra fastened the chain around his daughter's neck, where it caught the morning sunlight like a promise of new beginnings. She smiled up at him, and in that smile he saw Catherine's love, his own redemption, and the future they would build together. They rode out of Devil's Canyon as the sun climbed higher, leaving shadows behind them. Ezra held Sienna before him, on the saddle, her small body warm and alive against his chest. Brooklyn rode beside them, her hand occasionally brushing his in silent promise. Behind them, the canyon walls bloomed with morning roses, wildflowers that had found purchase in the stone, transforming barrenness into beauty through nothing more than time, hope, and the stubborn refusal to surrender. Papa, Sienna said, as they crested the ridge above their ranch. I love you. I love you too, little Rose. Always. If this tale of love lost and found again has touched your heart, give it a like and let us know in the comments. And if you believe that even the darkest nights can bloom into new dawns, ring that subscribe bell for more stories of the heart. Speaking of hearts and new beginnings, tell us in the comments below, where are you watching from today? We love hearing from folks all across this wide, beautiful country.